Hello, people of New World. It's me, Lamani. Welcome back to the channel. And today I have a hot video. We're going to be talking healing. Going to give you the all-encompassing healing guide for PvE and PvP. We're going to be talking about the different builds. We're going to be talking about secondaries. I'm going to give you all these deep dives, so be ready for a long video. We'll cover gearing, perks, RE versus refreshing, healing rotation, settings, gems. It's everything. It's been a while and there's not much content on this out there, so I want to give you the facts. So strap in, sit tight, and let's do this. Before we get started, keep doing the weird YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, tell everybody you know. I'd appreciate it. And look at the things down below. We are going to be starting a series doing weekly New World moments. So there's a Google form below. Submit your clips of the cool moments. I want the people of the community to show off what they're doing or cool things that are happening and give them a chance to sort of be in the content. So a little bit of a shout out for you. Madrina's link down below. You get 20% off. Black Friday sale going on right now. And then Discord, Twitch, Patreon, all that stuff. Patreon for exclusive content. But let's get into this healer stuff. Okay, well, you can't heal unless you have a build. So we're going to separate this into PvP and then I'll do a PvE section. I'll talk about everything. I'll give a thorough deep dive of all of this stuff. And then I'll start to touch on, okay, now here are the differences for PvP, PvE, or build 1, build 2, etc. Let's just start going. We're going to start with PvP group healing. So you're the dedicated 5-stack healer, whether it's a war, OPR, out in the world, whatever and what have you. So we need to absolve Blissful Touch. This combo, it's just the guarantee. We wouldn't want to use mana. And then right here, this is one of the most underused assets a healer has. There are so many healers that I watch that just don't even left click sometimes. And you should be going through ABC, always be clicking. If you are not clicking through every global cooldown that you have on your weapon, you are doing it wrong. So this can heal upwards of like 750 to almost 1,000 damage per person it passes through. That technically, if it passed through every single person, has some of the highest HPS in the game. So take advantage of that. Always be clicking. It is just undefeated. And the next, Sacred Ground, this is probably our strongest ability. This is just going to give you crazy output. We're going to have increased healing from it. So basically the bread and butter of your rotation is to put down Sacred Ground first. We'll also get stamina and mana back. It's just a pretty girthy and thick heal. And then on top of it with the perk, we then apply a Fortify. So not only do you have them increasing the heals that they're getting a pretty big heal from it, and then they're getting fortified as well. Now diving into this, we're going to take Desperate Speed, just easy cooldown reduction that should be popping all the time, especially in a build like this. Revitalize. This is part of the reason why we do the ABCs. So we're clicking not only for Blissful Touch, but then we have Revitalize. Every light attack we're doing is giving us 5% cooldown reduction. And then on top of that, we have Desperate Speed proccing. And then don't even mention if you have a refreshing move on your weapon, because that's just even more cooldown to add on top of your cooldown because you like cooldown. Now, because we don't have to take this anymore because we're going to go into DE, we take Sacred Protection and we take Intensify. Quite honestly, why would I not want passive 5% healing to everybody in your group? I think it's pretty strong, and compared to other options, I would just take that over anything else. Intensify, this is insane, kind of broken right now. I'll talk about that later with the gems, but you need this. If you are not taking Intensify, you will not be a top healer. You will not be having the highest healing output. It is just the simplest, easiest 30% healing increase that you have to maintain and adds a little bit of that skill gap nuance to your gameplay. Other thing I'm going to take, I'm a DE enjoyer instead of an LE enjoyer, and I'll touch on that after this. But DE baseline has a bigger heal. It also costs just about the same amount of mana. But the big thing is the bounce. I will tell you, there are so many times where I don't think my DE is going to bounce and hit somebody else. A lot of the target frames do not actually match up to 50% health. It'll look like maybe they're at like 60 to 70% health, and you'll hit them with this, and it'll still bounce to somebody else. Today was running an OPR and I had 2 7K heals pop. Why would I not take that? I've had up to 10,000 on a DE, and maybe that was combined with, another hot that went off too. It is insane. You get the perk with it, which helps you reset the cooldown. So it's basically just rinse and repeat, and you can keep machine gunning them off, especially if you're using the life staff with Divine Embrace on it. Personally, I don't, but it's just having that perk basically makes this just auto reset. It's like a free cooldown. You use it and you use it and you use it, and you can keep spamming it, and then it can keep bouncing depending on their health. Very, very strong. What else would I do? You got to take Divine Blessing. If you don't take this ultimate, again, kind of a throw. Why would you not passively want to heal 30% more if somebody goes below 50% health? It's just counterintuitive. Next, we're going to go into Orb. Right now, Orb is very strong. If you're looking for some of the highest healing output, you go Orb. And again, I'm going to talk about some of these nuances. But with Mending Protection on your weapon, you are getting almost a 50% healing increase when this procs, which is significantly higher. It's about 20%-ish higher when it's on gear compared to weapon. So best in slot life staff would be like orb, mending, refreshing move. That would be kind of my BIS order. But so I'm going to go all the way into mending. Now, some of you are going to be like, well, you only have 2 points. Like, how are you going to get Protector's Touch or what else are you going to get? Personally, I just go Bend Light and into Protector Strength. There's no reason I need to take this because I basically just have a constant 10% Fortify. Yes, I could have 25%, but I think it is much more of an asset to have increased healing over time, especially when you have a lower cooldown ability that doesn't do as much healing. We can get a lot more out of this by taking things like this, and then we just have this passive 10% on us anyway, so it's kind of a win-win in my opinion. This is what I like to use if I am in a base default, I am the dedicated group healer, typically. Now let's say you're not an enjoyer of Divine Embrace, and so instead you want to go Light's Embrace. Here's the setup I would say is best for you. This is a perfectly viable option. LE, in the greater scheme of things, has a lower cooldown than DE, still has plenty of output when you start to add on the buff percentages, and then you do get stamina back and you get accelerating Light's Embrace. So you get some really nice peel for yourself, and on top of it, a lot of your melee enjoyers will like that stamina back when they're up in melee range and close target. So don't hesitate. If you aren't somebody that likes to use DE, you can certainly use LE and it's just as effective, to be honest with you. You just don't have as much AoE spread, but I'd argue you have a lot more utility. Now, for other PvP builds, the other thing you will most commonly see is something called an AoE build or a blanket AoE healing build, where you're trying to heal as many people as much as you can and you are not a dedicated single target healer. How does that change things? So instead, we're still going to go into Absolve. We're going to take Blissful Touch. We're going to go into Sacred Ground. I'm going to go here, 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 here. Unfortunately, because we don't take this, we do have to take Enchanted Justice, which somehow I don't understand has not changed at this point in the game with how many changes have happened. This is one of the worst healing abilities we have. It is a, what is that, about a 48% weapon damage hot that does a 4-meter radius around you. Obviously, there's modifiers and things that go into play, but it's on a 2-minute cooldown. Not worth. Not worth, but we have to take it because we need this. Then we're going to go into Orb. Again, this is kind of the bread and butter of a AoE healer. You can throw this on pretty much your entire team, and it just keeps coming off cooldown. Then we go Beacon. And Beacon, I would argue that you do not need this point. So personally, I don't actually take this. I go into Bend Light and I take Protector Strength. We just want as much healing output as possible. So we, again, use a life staff that has Mending Protection on it so that we get that healing boost from Orb. We're throwing out all these orbs. We're putting Sacreds down. We're putting Beacons down. Now, some people might, why aren't you taking the 5 second longer? This build is typically in a Refreshing Evasion setup. So you just roll, and comboed with Beacon, which is like a 35-second cooldown, if you have any RE on there, it's going to take a significant chunk off of your cooldown. On top of that, then, we start to look at Revitalize, we look at Desperate Speed, especially Desperate Speed, because we have Orb on everybody. This will be proccing pretty much every 5 seconds. So we really don't have to worry, and by the time this comes up, that the 5 seconds would have been valuable, this is off cooldown but before this falls off, especially with this RE setup. So typically, I just do something like this for complete AoE healing with the Refreshing Evasion setup. Now, here's where some of these nuances start to come into play. I, as a single target group healer, that's typically what I do in wars. I will still go like this. I'll take this. I'll go, oh, sorry, missed that point. I'll go over here, 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 take this. Now, what have I been doing recently? Some of you back in the day might remember I used to run this build all the time. I agree that Orb is completely nuts and busted, but I think there's also something to say about Beacon's output as like a mobile Sacred Ground that you throw onto somebody and then they run around for you healing people. And when you combo a 3-stack Intensify, I've done Bend Light, I've got all my healing modifiers, with Beacon and Sacred Ground inside of any Gravwell, or you just throw it onto anybody, you're going to have this crazy healing per second. So I'm taking, you know, between Sacred and Beacon, we're getting upwards of 2,500 to that 3K range per second if both of these are ticking. And then other healers will be running Orb. So the sort of healer market is really oversaturated. So this is the Lamani special build. I don't think it is very valuable to just completely stack every single healer running Orb of Protection. I would like to see more Beacon than Orb, because Orb or Beacon can miss. People just might not put it in a great spot, but it gives you a lot more versatility to your healing output. You can have this sort of spread where I can still single target heal between this stuff, and this is on a relatively low cooldown, where most cases, Orb in this 5-group setup, or 5-man group setup, isn't super valuable because half the time I can't even hit them with it, or they already have it running, especially in war. So why am I wasting that when I could just have another blanket spread on top of my single target? So this is what I've been doing. I go here, 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 take this, and I take this. And then some people might ask, why do you not take Speed of Light? Personally, I think there is some good value in Speed of Light. And again, if you feel this way, you can certainly take it. I think sometimes running the beacon with Sacred Ground, when other people are going to be running Speed of Light, there is that speed, but I think it's a little bit counterintuitive because people get that haste bonus, and then a lot of them will just start to run out of your Sacred because they think they should charge because they're faster or start running around. So I go that because then I get this other 15% fortify that I now get instead of putting on my Orb of Protection. Because now I have to rely on another healer giving me Orb to get a 10% fortify, when now I can basically maintain my own 15% flat. As long as you're hitting shots, which you should be if you're going through the ABCs, you shouldn't have to worry. That is my opinion, and this is what I like to use for group healing in PvP. Ultimately, I think the meta is really wrapping around the Orb build for the group setup and the blanket spread AoE with just using Sacred, Orb, and Beacon. So that's the PvP healing meta right now, in my opinion. Now let's talk about safe PvP secondary options. My opinion, I made a video on this recently. We could go into Greatsword. So I want to touch on this a little bit. I'd go into here, I'd take here, I'd go here, here. I want this haste, right? I need that haste. And then I like taking Keen Posture because having Keen Speed on your Greatsword mixed with Swift Onslaught gives you a lot of movement speed. You're at like 40% haste and you start flying. Then I go Calamity, I go into here, I take here, I go here, 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 and then you have a couple options. Personally, I end up going here and I take this, and then you have a little bit of a flex. So you could go into more crit, which I like to do, or you could go into Adaptive Rush and get some healing. This is what I would say is probably your best option in terms of Greatsword, because it gives you the spread of being able to drop debuffs, gives you this sort of pseudo riposte that gives stam back, and you can use it in place of like the old evade on a Rapier, and then you can get out of roots and slows and use this for healing, slowing enemies, and getting a speed buff. What else would I use? This is Rapier. This is the bread and butter. Personally, I've been playing a lot. I will say Greatsword needs a little bit of work in terms of fluidity. I love it. It feels good, but there are a lot of cases where it says you are gridded or uninterruptible, where you still definitely are not gridded and uninterruptible. So it's a little bit frustrating to play around, whereas you could just go back and play OG Rapier. Not to say this isn't good. Theoretically, on paper, 100% this is always better. And again, if the game's feeling good, go ahead and use it. But this is probably the safest PvP option if you really want to. Now, the issue is the Rapier is the target of a lot of different nerfs. And we know this. We know how strong it is. So I'm trying to think of some other alternatives. And I have some things in the back pocket. Don't worry. I would say this is probably your S tier. This is like a good A+. And then another sort of S tier option would be our Void Gauntlet. If you're looking to not have really self-peel and you can heal with your VG, this is the setup I would go for a VG healing. We go here, here, here. You take those. And then you'd go into here. You take these. You can go Nully Oblivion so that you can remove debuffs. You also get stand backs. So you can play this yourself and you're just pumping your stamina and you can roll around in circles. And then personally, I go Scream. The options are up to you. I like to take Leeching Agony then. You could, in theory, go a build where you could like double pump orbs. I don't think it's worth because then we have to hit a heavy attack with it and it's just kind of a waste of time. So I end up going cooldown reduction, crit chance because we get some cooldown reduction there. And then you can kind of pick where else you'd like to go. And then I go Void Collar because it is a free heal. Even if you swap off of your life staff after getting Void Collar up, it kind of drops on the ground like a Sacred Ground and it still heals people. So it's a very, very solid option in terms of general healing output. Basically, if you want more output, you go Void Gauntlet. If you're not as concerned, you might want to go higher Con, or if you know you got some gamers to peel for you, you're good to go. Otherwise, you're going to go Rapier, Greatsword, or whatever else you're comfortable with in your style of play. Otherwise, too, this Hatchet build is something I'm going to be playing with a little bit more, just with the reworks to Hatchet. I'd actually switch this point, some of the throwing options, and I'd actually drop that too. Sorry, that's a damage build. And then going into here, here, and then I go here, and then you could probably take this, and you got a couple of good options. Personally, I think then you have this one just to do some extra damage, or you do this one. In my opinion, I'd probably go something like this, but it's just a really good secondary option to bust out a CC. You can cheat death. You can use a little bit of a leap to get out of grav wells and kind of chase people down and root them if you really wanted to. And it does have crazy damage output even when you're focus skilling. So those are your secondaries for PvP. All right, now what are we doing for PvE party healing? Personally, it's pretty much exactly the same as what I would say party healing is for PvP. I'd go here. I don't think there's ever a point to go into rebound because if you're going to hit one person and then you get the bounce, there are very small chances that you get this double bounce where it would be more worth for you to take the double bounce instead of going into a point over here to get more general all-purpose healing. I think at that point, somebody else is either going to pick them up. There's a hot that's going to help get somebody topped off, or you're going to get this cooldown reset where this one is just the value supersedes none of these. So that's what I would do. Then I'd go here, 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 take this, go into here. And then I would say Desperate Speed. Now, you could argue, okay, I don't need this like Protector Strength. I think it's a free 20%. If you want to just have more general PvE Fortitude, you could take this Fortify instead, and it would be hunky-dory, you'd be A-okay. But that is my general suggestion for PvE. I'd either take Protector Strength or Protector's Touch, and this is the mix. Now, PvE Secondary. Pretty much you have one option, people, and it's going to be this. You can run the Void Gauntlet setup like this, and again, you get your Void Collar proc. You can clump up some things when they're stacked and give yourself a scream. But what I would personally do is I go here, 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 and then we'll come back there. But I go into Essence Rupture and take Glimpse of the Void. I can hit an orb. The orb can come back and heal. I can double pop the orb to put a double rend on the target, but Essence Rupture is nuts. This gives healing to anybody. It's essentially Leech. Heals everybody that's on it. Anybody gets 15 stamina back when they hit the target, and then it pops for weapon damage healing, just AoE spread when it ends. And then 2, you can get Glimpse of the Void when you hit all these stacks and do everything like casting all your abilities. And what you do then is you can reset it, and you can either throw out another Essence Rupture, which will instantly pop your second one to give AoE healing and then put a new one on. You can throw out another orb and then bring your orb back and pop it, or use it a double time to get the rend up. And then you have Oblivion here just to give everybody more damage. So you're kind of like an Oblivion bot here, and you have a little bit of utility and some AoE damage. You can then go into whatever pretty much you want. I would take the crit chance, and then it's kind of up to you. I'd probably go here and here. If you are sort of a DPS enjoyer, what I would highly suggest then is dropping this, and I would actually go into Blade. Another option you have is you can pretty much go full Blade side, take Void Collar for easy healing. You can go something like this. You can do whatever. You could go full left side if that's just easier to remember. But personally, as a healer, I think you should always be taking Orb. And then we could do either Refreshing Harvest, or I like having Mending Evasion just for a full heal when you get topped off, so that you can sit there and right click and hold and sit there like this, and then get your mana back, and then get a free heal when you dodge. And a 20-second cooldown. It's pretty nuts. Something I didn't say about the other build when you have Glimpse of the Void on is you can sit there and right click. Just sit there waiting for orbs if you really want to, because we end up going to Refreshing Harvest. But these are your PvE secondary options. All right, so what good is a healer build if you don't have the settings to help you out? There's a lot of different settings in the game. Okay, there's not that many, but the things you need to know as a healer. Obviously, have your consumables bound to something comfortable, do whatever you need. But the thing that's really going to make the difference in the healing is these life staff combat healing buttons. Personally, I think that you need a target self button. Right now, I think it's bound default by control. So this is the thing that's going to let you do this. So this is the only way I can cast Sacred Ground on myself without having to pull it out. You could also, in theory, you'd have your Sacred out and then hit your button, but then you'd still go into the casting animation. What you need to do is hold your button first. So mine is on mouse 5. Okay, so it's the side button here. I hold it down, then I hit my ability, boom, it comes out. You can do that with Sacred Ground. You can do that with any casted targeted heal. So like Divine Embrace, boom. Okay, self-explanatory, simple. That's a very important one. Have something to exit your auto target. Why do I want this? This is what's going to let me free cast Sacred Grounds. There's times where I'll have Sacred Ground out, and let's just say I'm targeting somebody, but I don't want it to go there. And sometimes it's quicker to just do this. So then I can decide, okay, I need to put it in this doorway instead of targeting somebody. So that's a good bind to have. Do something comfortable. I have mine on middle mouse. I don't hit it very often. Cycling targets, this is one, right now it's kind of buggy with wheel up and wheel down. It doesn't feel right, and there's some stuff that goes on, but I keep mine on wheel up and wheel down. I don't frequently use this. I oftentimes find it's easier to target and retarget when I'm playing like a solo pug OPR by just rolling or right clicking to cancel the ability and then trying to target. So what I'm saying is I aim at people when I'm targeting, you'll see a lot of the time, and I'll right click to cancel instead. So I won't go through and cycle through. I will just keep going, or I'll roll and I'll look for my next person. It keeps my my bend light up, and I'm just keep looking around, and I target people generally when they're close enough. So that's kind of how I do it if I'm free targeting random people, or if I'm not in a war, or if I am in a war or not in a war, and I'm trying to heal somebody who's outside of my group. That is also how I do it. You'd have to have a group key modifier, but just another thing to note. Speaking of that, you do need something to toggle you in group or not group mode. Okay, so this is the importance of having a group keybind. You'll see I'm hitting my bind, which is my other mouse button, and my group block is turning green or not green. When it's green, you're in group mode. What does that mean? Well, if I try to cast something, it will only lock to people in my group and scroll in order, okay? You used to not do this, very nice, and it's nice to have a bind. I don't really use this anymore. Typically, I'm just out of group mode, so you don't have to, but it's not gonna auto-target to the people in your group. Instead, you can do it with keybinds. So you're gonna set some comfortable keybinds so that you can just cycle through your group members. So what is important about this? One, make sure if you're a scroller that you can go into group or not group mode, or if it's just easier for you. But two, this is stressing the importance of keybinds. I can stay out of targeted group healing mode and go like this and see anybody else, but then also now, ooh, they need healing. Boom, and I got them. Perfect. So let's talk over that a little bit. So what keybinds do I use for targeting my group members? Personally, I use VB and G. Does it make sense to you? It makes sense to me personally. So you never need to bind a group member one bind because that is fulfilled by target self bind. Why would I always make 2 binds for myself if I am always the first person in my party list? I don't have a party there, but find something that is comfortable for you. So for me, it makes sense because my thumb is kind of generally near there that I can hit V and it's my second person. I can hit B, it's my third person. N is my fourth person. And then G is just easier for me to hit instead of rebinding M because I have that ingrained in my head for map, that I go there so that I go to the bottom of my list. And I know that that's the very end. So I kind of have V is the top, G is the bottom. And so I can flip between those and then I can go through and cycle to the other 2. Again, do something that makes sense to you, but you do not need to bind a group 1 member. In general, I said this thing about consumables because some people like to bind these binds to their targeted heal buttons because it just makes more sense to them. If that's the case, then do something like this where you put these binds over here and just get used to it. It's going to be a little weird at first, but it's something that is super important right now in the current meta, or just if you're going to be a top-end healer, is being able to use targeted keybinds. It makes a world of difference. Yes, you could cycle through group mode and not group mode and scroll, but it just takes a lot of time. So that is the biggest thing with healing. Now, there are some other healing options that we should talk over. All right, the rest of the settings that are important go under game. So one, player nameplate amount. I set it like 75 to 100. Typically when I'm in a war, I try to go 100. If it's going to completely destroy your computer to do that, then don't. But it's really handy to see where the health bar is getting low and where your heal's needed if your group's topped off, if you're in a giant clump or you're an AoE spread healer. This targeted healing button is simply the whether or not you can actually target people. I don't foresee a reason why to ever turn it off. It's going to allow your sacred ground to automatically go onto people. Even if you are an AoE healer and you hate targeted heals, you still should have this on. It just makes the most sense. So what do I do for all mine? Freeform camera, I put on. If you don't, it will follow the active target when it is disabled. And so your head could be spinning all around. Same thing with like camera aim retargeting. We're just gonna turn this off. A lot of these two, basically I'm preventing you from being nauseous and throwing up while you're trying to do a war. So you can thank me later. Sticky lock, I keep off. Manual target lock, I keep on. So I can turn off the actual target locking thing with my middle mouse button. And then group mode, this is just, I don't know why this setting's even still in the game, to be honest with you, when I can just be changing it with my side button that I have bound already. Those are the important healing settings. All right, so let's talk attributes. This can kind of be multifaceted in a sense. What is my baseline? I typically sit at about 150 con right now, just given how much damage is out there. I never really like to go below 150 con, and you can still pump unless I'm just trying to meme and I am a AoE healer that I can just run away and be a rat. That's the only way I'd go lower. I'll get some 5 con builds going and we'll see what we can pump through. Just do a little bit of AoE spread and well, it'll be interesting. Regardless, I stay 150 con, and when I'm PvPing, I like to go 150 to 200 depending on what I'm thinking I'm going to see, what I'm going to expect, or what my role is. So if I really have to be in the thick of it, I would push 200 con. If I'm going to be closer points, if I'm group healing and I'm going to be with the boys or the girls, going into packs, killing people, we go 200 typically. I am playing a lot of shirking fort, so I feel pretty comfy. I've got max resil. It's a toss-up. Play to your strengths and what you are comfortable with. Do not use Lamani as the all-seeing encyclopedia of healer knowledge and just screw yourself over. I play 150. You can play 100 if you want. You could play 300 if you want. But I recommend 150 to 200 personally for PvP. And then I just max the rest focus. I do have a food on right now. If you want to not spend $1 bajillion on food and want to balance out your gear, and because some of it has con, some of it doesn't, you can just go slow roasted bear flank with root vegetables. And that is a very cheap alternative to your old blackened lava barb. Anyway, continuing on, just pump the rest focus. I don't have to talk through every point. The one thing I want to say is if you haven't played the game in a while, thank the heavens above that they finally changed this. I know they changed it, they reworked it a little bit still, but it's no longer the old one that just never even procced when your mana was at 0 because there was no way to get to 0. And now we actually get value out of this. So that's nice. In PvE, if I'm going to be talking attributes, honestly, I don't foresee a world where you really need to go higher focus unless you're trying to pump more damage. So in PvE, I typically sit at 200. I think that's safe. You still have over 300 focus and it keeps you alive and you have more resist. You could also start to go medium if you wanted to in PvE, but that's a different topic. So in general, PvP 150 to 200. PvE, I just sit flat baseline at 200 generally. Okay, so before we get into perks and gearing and all that stuff, I want to talk about RE versus refreshing. Why would you want refreshing? Why would you want RE? Personally, I think it is BIS for a group healer, like one who's in the dedicated 5-stack healer, to be running a refreshing build. This keeps your lower cooldown things at a lower cooldown because you're not going to see as much benefit from refreshing evasion and rolling around. It's going to prevent you from rolling around as much because you're not wanting to force some cooldown. That being said, there might be a little bit of room for some things, depending on your build, to get some benefit out of your rolls, so having refreshing evasion. But typically when you're running things like Orb, LE, or DE, and Sacred Ground, refreshing evasion just isn't really the best option. The thing that really decides whether or not you're going to go into RE is pretty much beacon usage. So you see right now I'm in a full refreshing build. Well, pretty much I do have one piece refreshing evasion. I'm at a 25-ish second cooldown on my beacon, which is normally in the mid-30s. If I roll right now, you'll see I get a little bit. I get like 1 second when I roll, if that, right? So it's not super value, but I would argue that it is nice to get that little bit of a boost, okay? So what if I'm a group healer? Here is the big benefit. Let me swap over to just random refreshing evasion pieces that I had laying around. And so I'm now in a 5-piece refreshing evasion. So my beacon is now at 31 and 29, right? And I'm rolling around and then boom, it pops down. But you can go higher, right? If you had it on your jewelry, I only have one piece of jewelry with it on, but you'll just see that there is a pretty significant difference compared to when you're rolling versus when you're not. So when you are AoE spread and you don't really have to worry as much about hitting people or left clicking and you're just looking to put down heals, you see much more of a benefit when you have these bigger cooldowns like that to get a flat like 2.5 seconds off or up to 3, maybe if you're completely maxed out, compared to just a refreshing. So lower cooldowns go refreshing, higher cooldowns go refreshing evasion. I think typically too on your secondary, you do benefit more from having straight refreshing, since straight refreshing applies to both weapon cooldowns and refreshing evasion is only the equipped weapon. Now, what I will say is if you're in a refreshing evasion build and you have a cooldown on your other weapon, you could theoretically roll, and then when you swap, you do still get the actual cooldown reduction. So you go like that and it'll just like finish. So there's that, but I just think there's more benefit going a full refreshing for both weapons. So BIS in a 5-stack group healer is refreshing. When you're AoE spread, that's refreshing evasion. All right, I'm gonna just hammer through these because the biggest thing is knowing RE versus refreshing. What I shoot for is, because I'm a group healer build, I go refreshing and then insert perks that I need. What do I need as a healer? Pretty much all of them. Beacon, I think, is a toss-up. If you want to throw the extra crit on for utility, for your melee and your other damage dealers, you go ahead if you can fit it in. But the absolute necessary ones are Fortifying Sacred Ground, Refreshing Divine Embrace, Accelerating Light's Embrace, and then Mending Protection. If you go Mending Protection, it must be on your weapon. The one that will always be on gear is Fortifying Sacred Ground. If you also think that you might get some more value out of your single target healing, you could go Refreshing DE on your weapon. I would argue that it's pretty similar. If you argue the 60% on your weapon versus the 41% on your gear, would you take that 19% split, or would you take the more healing output regardless? I think that on a 5-second cooldown is negotiable. Anyway, everything else, I do insert Refreshing and then LE Aversion. I'll do Resilience. I'll do Shirking Fort, and then you have your perk. So for me, I have Fort Refreshing LE, I've got Shirking Refreshing Resil, Shirking LE Refreshing, and then Shirking Refreshing Resil. And then here, these are what I need to reroll. I am testing some things with Refreshing Evasion. Ultimately, I just need new ones, but Refreshing Divine Embrace and Accelerating Light's Embrace, I always put on my boots because Sagacious is just a very easy, solid option to throw on your shoes. So when you alternate between the two, it just makes gear flipping a little bit easier. Neck, I would argue you need health and stam recovery are absolute BIS and you always need. Now, third perk, you could go Thrust Protection, you could go Ice, you could go Fire, or you could go Divine. Thrust is really necessary right now with some of those Dex rats. Ring, gotta roll a new one, but Hardy Sacred is absolute must, and then you go Refreshing or RE depending on your build. This one's a toss-up. Do I like lightning absorption? No, but I do like having refreshing evasion, refreshing, and refreshing toast on my earring. This is why I want to run 2-piece refreshing evasion so that I get more out of it. If I have a 2-stack RE, I feel like I get more value when I'm running something like a beacon build, and then I feel like my rolls do a little bit more on top of the shirking forts. Let's talk life staff. Ultimately, BIS life staff, I would argue if you're running an orb build, running mending protection. This will always give you more healing output. And like I said, the cooldown between gear on refreshing divine embrace compared to life staff or on a weapon is pretty close on a 5 or 6 second cooldown that it doesn't matter to me and I'd rather have more output. Otherwise, if you're not running orb in your build, for instance, if you're going DE beacon and then sacred ground, I think you could go Woda or you could go one that has refreshing divine embrace on. Your choice. When it comes to secondary, you always want keen speed and then whatever perk's most important. So for instance, Rapier, keen speed, sundering riposte, blunderbuss, keen speed, crippling, keen speed, energizing counter. And if it's a Void Gauntlet, this is like pretty much BIS Void Gauntlet, keen speed, blessed, diminishing orb. So those are your options, but always perk keen speed. And then if it's VG, you need blessed for extra healing output. Stone form for your heart rune. You can argue that other options could be neat. I want to test with some things, but I think having stone form, and you could do either the hardened form, fortifying form, and then, you know, there is some room to say, okay, will you get fortify capped? You could argue with this that you might get fort capped. I think it's close enough that it doesn't really matter, and I would rather take this over the healing output one. It could be beneficial, but I think just generally taking less damage and having up to 40% less for 5 seconds is super nice. This will drop all your debuffs. You can't get staggered and you'll stay alive. As far as consumables go, make sure you have gemstone dust. You've got your potions going. Oak flesh bombs are kind of in this weird category right now. I want to make a video dedicated to consumables. But other than that, here are your food options. You could go slow roasted or you could go blackened lava barb, desert sunrise, and energizing hearty meal. Why do I use all of those? Because you'll see I have all my buffs stacked. I've got attribute, mana regen, and then dot duration decreased. And then you can throw in your other stuff like honing stones, topaz potion, incense if you want to. That's pretty much everything for PvP gearing and consumables. Now let's talk PvE. It's going to be pretty much the same boat, same sorts of perks that you're going to want on your gear. Fortifying sacred ground, mending on your weapon most likely, and then refreshing DE somewhere. You can decide between weapon, boots, whatever you want, but it's a little bit different. You don't need resil, you don't really need shirking fort as much. So what are we going to do? I would say go refreshing, and then you have your respective ward, like ancient ward if you're going to be doing las, because that's pretty much necessary. And then you can do something like Elliot version on top. And then your gems would coincide with whatever the attribute is there. Same thing with your jewelry. It's pretty much in the same boat as PvP. In terms of the gems that you're going to be using, I like to go, this is my split right now. It is a little weird. I need to get thrust protection on my neck because I think that's just nuts. I think you should sit somewhere around 20% thrust protection in my opinion. The rest, you could go like a 10-10 split. Oh, going to be AFK soon. You could go 10-10 split. You could go like a 11 sort of 6 split. It really depends on what you have rolled. Obviously, I don't love that I have lightning damage. It's kind of a wasted gem, but I think having refreshing evasion, and refreshing toast all in one piece is kind of nuts. I would say in general, you do want thrust protection. There is value in putting an emerald in some of your gear and hitting that 20%. Up to you. Depends on what your server looks like. Depends on what you personally struggle against. Those are all of my recommendations for general gearing, gems, and consumables for PvP and PvE. Listen, PvP healing is fairly simple. Basically, it just revolves around the idea of you're looking for clumps, you're looking for gravels, you're looking for grouped up people to drop your AoE heals on, and then keeping your eye kind of looking up like a chameleon, watching health bars on your team. You're going to try and top them off with your single target heals. Again, it depends on your build, but general gameplay tips are save your cooldowns for massive AoE, but also understand that there's no point on sitting with a beacon for the longest time. Let's say everybody's scattered doing nothing. There's not really a big potential for a clump coming. Why are you just holding like a beacon or a sacred when you could dump it off and just shoot from a range and get your cooldowns back down or even roll around with RE and have them ready to go for when there are big fights? I'm saying hold your cooldowns when the clumps are there, but also know when to use them so that you aren't wasting them. I think the other thing is understand when to run away. You need to know when you're in too deep and you need to pull back. My biggest thing is you can never save stupid. Unfortunately, people will dive in, they'll get overconfident, they'll have this surge of energy and they'll keep going and they'll think that they can take on the world, you know, probably because you're a god healer, obviously, but there's this point of no return where you have to understand that you need to dip back no matter how much you like that other person. Don't overcommit, Watch for clumps. And again, I'm going to say this over and over and over again, but ABC. If you are not just constantly left clicking when nothing is going on around you, you are wasting healing potential and wasting damage. You shoot through whatever clumps of names you see, and you just try and get as much healing as you can. You can use this as one of your largest heals. I was seeing some of my heals hit for 1,000 just on a blissful touch. So you need to understand the power of your left click and then save cooldowns for clumps. You can top people off just left clicking. Somebody else probably has a hot rolling on them, but you never want to overlap sacred grounds, beacons, orbs constantly. So you've got to keep your eye out for clumps. You also have to understand, okay, you know that you just saw a sacred ground go down right in the melee clump, but you know there's a group of you healers and there's some people coming from the backside. Do not waste your sacred ground on the bigger clump to try and get more healing and overwrite somebody else's. Simply put it on yourself so that you can keep all your healers alive so that you can turn the tide and win the fight. I think in general with PvP, the biggest tips I'm going to say in order, one is ABC. You get cooldown reduction, you have so much extra healing that you put out. 2, manage your cooldowns efficiently. And the last thing is, do not overextend to the point of death. A dead healer does no healing. I would rather be middle of the charts than at the complete bottom because I died 10 times. It's just a better strategy. So keep that in mind when you're PvP healing. PvE healing is pretty much the same, but we have some different rotational differences. I think in general, when it comes to rotation for PvP, here's what you're going to do. You're going to make sure that you roll, you're going to get your intensify stacks going, then you are going to put down sacred ground. Sacred ground is sort of your opener heal. Once you have that down, then you put in beacon, then you put in orb, then you try to divine. Ultimately, if you need to give somebody a burst heal, you try to sacred first, then you throw divine on top of them to get the big burst. If you can't and you don't have that window, just pop one or the other. And you can too use sacred ground as just a burst AoE heal. It does tick right away, so keep that in mind. But I think rotationally, it is roll, heavies, then sacred, then do the rest of your healing load. So keep that in mind for any sort of trying to burst heal or just general PvP mechanics. PvE healing is very similar in the sense of rotation, but it's in general a little bit more cut and dried. I will say it revolves around putting down your sacred ground down first, and then you hit them with orbs so that they get a higher snapshot at hot off of the orb so that they're getting more heals over time, and then again, they're getting fortified. You keep your Divine Embrace in the pocket for any burst potential, but then now you have this interesting Void Gauntlet play. It's a little bit different than in PvP. So in PvE, you'll be throwing out your orb, and you'll let it come back to make sure that everybody gets the hot. But if you let it come back all the way, you'll also get the hot yourself if you need it. You can also opt to pop it back so that it burst heals on your orb, or you can use your orb to double pop. So as soon as it hits, you tap the button so that it pops and you get a double rend on the target. You have Oblivion now. You can run up to the melee and put Oblivion down, or depending if you're having to carry your group or not, you can put it in your own feet and try and do some more damage. And then again, Essence Rupture is probably your strongest heal, to be honest with you. It's sort of a sleeper heal. You put it on the target, and then everybody is healing themselves, and then it burst heals. So it's very easy, and it's very important to, whenever Essence Rupture is off cooldown, throw it on the target and don't miss. Other than that, just keep on ABC left clicking. If you aren't clicking, you have a problem, especially in PvE, because this just translates to damage. Just keep shooting the boss and you will also hit your melee. Same thing goes for your orb. You should be shooting your orb into the boss, because anybody it passes through, or when it hits the boss, it'll hit everybody around it. So you don't really have to worry. Ultimately, PvE a little bit more simplistic in the rotational differences and nuances of gameplay, just understanding that your Void Gauntlet's important. I will say about your Void Gauntlet as well, if you do opt for Blade, Blade is a very strong healing cooldown. You go in, do some damage, put the rends on the target, and then you get Void Caller to proc. Void Caller will heal just as much as like a Sacred Ground does, if you want to use that sometimes to heal your melee and give a little bit of an extra boost, or maybe there's some downtime where you're like, hey, I just do not need to worry. I can pump some extra damage for the team. They'll be good. You can also go into melee to put down that Oblivion, and that acts as a pseudo healing cooldown because they're doing more damage, meaning they're going to be doing more on their Essence Rupture. So just consider all of those things when you are PvE healing. It's, again, a little bit more relaxing than PvP, but it is still a ton of fun as you start to add in some of these nuances and a little bit of the intricacies to make your gameplay a little bit better. All right, so that is my long deep dive novel of a video regarding PvE and PvP healing. If you have any questions, you can always go down below, hit the Discord and send me a DM. I also play on Valhalla, so if you want to send me a direct message on in-game, you can go ahead. But As always, I appreciate you just taking the time, and I hope this is a good reference guide for a lot of you. I know it's a lot of my just internal monologue, just talking about the things in the game. There's a lot of nuances and different things that occur, and a lot of different choices that some of us make just based on our gameplay decisions. Even Leo might play a little bit different than some of you. So it is always up to you on what you like to do best. Just use this as a reference. In all, a couple things. Use the Madrina's link, get that 20% off down below. Next, we want to be doing a weekly highlights video for New World clips. So please feel free to submit your clips to the Google form. I'd really appreciate it. And then too, Leo's shaking the desk. But you can join the Discord, follow us on Twitch, Twitter, all that good stuff. And if you need anything in the meantime, please let me know. But as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you to every single one of you beautiful people for being you. Please do the weird YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell. And I'll see you next time.